everyone. We want to thank you for joining us for our 2021 Virtual Southern Home and Garden Show virtual presentations. Today we have Mr. Mitchell Mote that is going to be presenting on spring maintenance of small equipment with us. We want to thank our 2021 sponsors, the Pulaski Lions Club, Bankston Motorhome, Big Creek Winery, Bull on the Run, Farm Bureau, Five Stones Landscape, Tri-Green Equipment, Giles County Co-op, Pilot Maintenance, Blue Line Pressure Washing Services, Pulaski Electric System, Haney Realty and Property Management, as well as the Giles County Chamber and UTTSU Extension. We ask that you go and visit our vendors this year. We have All American Gutter Protection, Aspen Hill Growers, Butcher Drafting Services, Flowers Creamery, Leaf Guard, Georgia's Quilts, Columbia Kubota, Kathy G Creations, Guardian Garage Floors, and Lane Roofing Company. You can check us out on all of these different social media sites. We do have our home and garden show site that will keep all of the videos and everything posted on it, as well as our Pulaski Lions Club Southern Lawn Garden and Home Show Facebook page. And with that, I'm going to stop share and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mitchell Mote.
Okay, thank you, Darby. Let me see if I can get this pulled up here the way I ought to be. Okay. All right, is that looking like it's supposed to?
It does.
All right, very good. Because I don't, all I see is a presentation. You know, all the images went away. So anyway, here we go. All right. Well, I appreciate the invitation to come and spend some time with you this afternoon and talk about this topic of taking care of lawn and garden tools. I do want to say, you know, right off the bat, I'll make this disclaimer that the use of any product name or image in this presentation is really just for the sake of example. It's not, should not be viewed as a recommendation for a product, nor a condemnation of that product if I happen to mention a brand name or something here in this presentation. Okay, so you know why this topic? This presentation was initially created last year in response to a request that was made by one of the citizens here in the county. We have a weekly lawn and garden radio show on a local radio station, and she called in and was talking about pruning things and how her old pruners were dull and she needed to sharpen them, but she didn't know how. She said, well, you folks ought to have something, you know, teach people about that. Well, the intent was to have a live in-person program so that folks could understand, you know, how to teach them how to do those kind of things. But, you know, as it worked out, we weren't able to do that. So we did a virtual kind of a program instead, I guess. And so when Darby contacted me back a few weeks ago, asked if we do this, well, I thought this kind of dovetailed right in because I could use some of the stuff that already put together last year. So talking about, you know, taking care of lawn and garden tools, making them work better and maybe last a little bit longer. But why me? You know, what qualifications do I have? Well, I am not a mechanic. Okay, by any stretch of the imagination. Don't pretend to be, and I'm a county agent, I'm not a mechanic. But I do participate in garden tractor pulling. And so as a result of that, I have had some little bit of experience in working on these small engines and things such as that in order to get these old tractors ready and compete in the garden tractor pulling field. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, a fair amount of personal experience, but again, I am not a mechanic. Like a fellow once said, you know, all I said was that I worked on them. I never said I fixed anything. So I kind of take that motto sometimes. You know, this thing was talking about originally lawn and garden tool care for ladies, but it's really for just anybody. And when we think about using lawn and garden tools, basically they fall into two categories. We've got, you know, hand tools, like see the lady using right here, the pair of hedge clippers, or we've got power tools. that either use a 4-stroke cycle motor or a 2-stroke cycle engine. And so that's those are really the two options you've got, whether it's a tiller, whether it's a chainsaw, whether it's a string trimmer. Those are kind of power tools that we use, lawnmowers, etc. And then lots and lots of different hand tools. But what do we use them for? What are the primary things? If you think about it, one of the biggest things that we use these tools for is to cut. Okay, whether it's a lawnmower, you're mowing grass, pruners, saws, whatever the case, making pruning cuts on trees and shrubs. You've cut the tops and the roots from weeds and other unwanted plants. We cut through or dig through the soil just for cultivation's sake and so on. So we're going to kind of focus this talk a little bit on maybe keeping these tools running well and cutting well. Okay, now let's talk about the lawnmower first. Let's keep this lawnmower cutting the way we'd like for it to. And the information here, or the things that I say about the engine, would apply to any piece of equipment that uses a 4-stroke engine, whether it's a lawnmower, whether it's a tiller, whatever the case may be. So the first thing to remember is if it won't start, it won't cut. Okay, nobody would argue with that. If the darn thing won't start, it's not going to cut. So what's the first steps in keeping these things cutting, keeping them running? Well, first thing, every one of these pieces of equipment that you buy is going to have an operator's manual. Okay, and it's not nearly as big and thick and full as the operator's manual on an automobile is. Obviously, it's not, but that operator's manual has a lot of information in there. It's going to tell you how to operate how to start it. All right, it's going to tell you how to stop it, and those are two very important things. It's going to tell you how to check fluid levels in there. It's going to tell you what kind of fluids in terms of engine oil, etc. How often those things should be checked, how often they should be changed. It's going to tell you, some may even have a separate manual for the motor. The motor manufacturer may have a manual included with the equipment, and then you've got the equipment manual, the actual tool itself. So the owner's manual, it's not necessarily great literature. It's not something that you look forward to coming home in the evening and sitting down and reading the owner's manual, the operator's manual, but it's something that you need to do if you're going to get the best long life and best value out of this equipment, especially the power equipment. We're paying for that stuff. It's cheap. We're paying for all of it, but it's not cheap. The power equipment's not, and we'd like for it to last just as long as we possibly could. So you use your owner's manual, operator's manual. You learn the basics of what it takes to operate the machine, to make it do what you want to do, how to make adjustments on it, and so on. Now, we talked, Darby was calling this spring lawn care or care of spring maintenance of small equipment. Actually, it doesn't have to be in the spring, but a lot of what you can do in the fall of the year will help things get started off in springtime. So we're talking about motorized equipment to begin with. And what does it take for those engines to run? All right, it takes three things. It takes fuel or gasoline, and it takes air, and it takes a spark of some kind to ignite that mixture of fuel and air to create an explosion. Okay, now gasoline is typically the fuel of choice, and gasoline is not doesn't last forever. Okay, it does have some shelf life to it. If you buy a can of gasoline and you're going to leave it sitting over in the shed, for a long time before you get it used up, the lighter hydrocarbons, and the hydrocarbons are the things that are in that gasoline that explode, that burn, okay, that ignite and cause the engine to run. Those lighter hydrocarbons are the ones that are most volatile and the ones that ignite most readily. Well, over time, they tend to dissipate. They evaporate, they go away. And so the remaining hydrocarbons are a little bit not as volatile. And sometimes gasoline that's been sitting for a while, engines won't start as readily. Okay, they don't start as easily as they would otherwise. And there's nothing wrong at all with storing gasoline for a period of time. But if you're going to do that, it's probably a good idea to use something like this fuel stabilizer that you see pictured here. It's very easy to use. You just mix it up. You don't mix it up. You pour it into the gasoline. It'll tell you on there for X number of gallons of gasoline. You put so many ounces of the fuel stabilizer in it. And what it does, it helps to, as the name implies, it helps to stabilize that fuel and to help prevent the loss of some of those lighter hydrocarbons, the more volatile hydrocarbons that will help that gasoline retain its freshness, if you will. And also, if you're going to store a piece of equipment, lawnmower, garden tiller, whatever the case may be, in over the winter with gasoline in the motor, it's a good idea to put the fuel stabilizer into the motor itself, into the fuel tank, and run it, let it circulate through there to help avoid some hard starting issues come next spring. And throughout the year, whether you're going to keep gasoline stored for a long period of time or not, it's just a little bit of insurance to add the fuel stabilizer to it, just to help ensure that it maintains some freshness. Okay, so you got to have good fresh fuel, and using the fuel stabilizer is a way to help maintain that, or to help keep it good and fresh. All right, so all of these little engines, and again, we're talking about 4-cycle engine, and what's the difference between a 4-cycle and a 2-cycle engine? Well, a 4-cycle engine, it takes 4 revolutions, okay, or 4 strokes, if you will, to complete a cycle. All right, and that's the piston going down, the piston going up, valves opening, etc. And that's what you're going to find on most things like lawnmowers, garden tillers, etc. On some of the handheld power equipment, chainsaws, string trimmers, gasoline-powered hedge clippers, and so on, very often you're going to find those as 2-cycle engines. And 2-cycle engines are called 2-cycle because it takes 2 revolutions in order for them to complete a cycle. All right, so there's some differences in those, and one of those is kind of what we're going to talk about right now. On a 4-cycle engine, they have an oil sump. You've got a separate tank or a compartment that you put gasoline in these motors, and then you've got one where you put the oil. So what's the purpose of the oil? The purpose of the oil is to keep things lubricated and to cut down on friction, things from overheating and so on. When you think about, how fast these little motors turn, typically the governed speed on those from the factory is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,600 revolutions per minute. So you've got these metal parts inside that are rotating at this fair amount of speed. Well, they generate some heat. And if there's not a lubricant like the oil, the engine oil, the motor oil, then very soon those things would overheat and just kind of melt together, weld together, if you would, and then you've got a piece of junk out there. So that's why it's so important to have the motor oil in there. Now, what kind of oil to use? Well, your operator's manual, your owner's manual tells you that, okay? And then you've got to ensure that level stays correct. And most 4-cycle motors today, they'll have a dipstick, kind of like you see on an automobile. And so in this image here on the slide, this young lady, she's checking the engine oil level on this little walk-behind lawnmower. She pulled the dipstick out. The dipstick tells you what the oil level is. Is it low? Is it high? And based on that, you know whether you need to add any oil. And it's simple. It's easy to do. You'll notice there's a little brush laying up there on top of the recoil starter mechanism on the lawnmower. Why is the brush there? Okay, we'd like to keep as much dirt out of the inside of these motors as we can, because as I said, your parts are moving at a high rate of speed, 3,000 plus revolutions per minute. And if you add a little dirt in there, very often it'll be gritty, and that can just add a contaminant, can cause some wear. It can also potentially, depending on where it winds up, it can reduce fuel flow, and it can affect the way the engine runs and so on. But if nothing else, it can add to or increase the level of wear in the moving parts inside the motor. So the brush is there just to brush off the areas around the oil filler cap or the gas filler cap, to knock off any loose debris, dirt accumulated, etc., before you open that cap up and maybe knock some of that stuff off inside of the engine there. Okay, so we got to make sure we've got plenty of oil in there, that the things are going to stay lubricated, and we're going to change the oil often enough, or as often as it's recommended by the operator's manual. Because as we go through the as we go through the process of using these pieces of power equipment, lawnmowers, garden tillers, you create a fair amount of dust sometimes, depending on how dry it is when you're not using those. And that lawnmower is pulling in air, and you can get dirt inside the motor, and that dirt can accumulate sometimes in the oil, and that makes the oil dirty, and that takes away its ability to lubricate, its ability to help keep the internal parts cooled off, and it has to be changed on a regular basis. And your operator's manual will tell you that if you're operating under real dirty conditions, you might need to change it at X number of hours, say 25 hours interval. Whereas if you're operating under conditions that are not so dusty and dirty, you may can extend it out to 50 hours. But the point is, you want to pay attention to that, because if you maintain the oil level in there like you should, good clean oil, that's going to extend the life of the motor. All right, so we got to have clean fuel. We've got to have fresh fuel. All right, fresh, clean fuel. The motor's got to stay lubricated. It's got to have air. All right, that was one of the first things that we mentioned, is you've got to have air mixed in with the fuel, with the gasoline, to create a fuel air mixture that's going to explode inside the cylinder on this motor and create the power. That's what makes the thing run. So on these little lawnmowers, and it doesn't matter if it's a larger engine, ride-on engine, they all are going to have a filter of some kind, an air filter of some kind. You pull the cover off. Typically, it's held on there very often just by a wing nut with a bolt run down through there. But you take the cover off, and here you see the exposed air filter on this little lawnmower. And we look on the outside, it's got a gray foam piece that wraps around the filter. This is called a pre-filter, and it's there to kind of catch big pieces of dirt and so on before they get to the primary filter itself. That little foam pre-filter, it's flexible, it's got some elasticity to it, and most of the time the directions in your operator's manual is going to tell you that if it's dirty, you wash it. Just wash it with a mild soap and detergent solution, get it good and clean, dry it out, and maybe depending on the engine manufacturer's recommendations, it may suggest to you that you need to put a few drops of clean motor oil after you have washed that foam pre-filter, that foam pre-cleaner, and let it dry out. You add just a few drops of clean motor oil and work it into that filter, which helps it to catch some of those particles of dirt, debris, etc., before they get into the primary filter itself. Now, when you pull that cover off, then you've got the primary filter, and that's kind of what you're seeing there. That you see the top of it, it's blue in color. And if you've ever looked at the air filter on an automobile, these are made very similar to that. Very often, what you're going to find is it's a pleated paper filter, meaning that you've got just layers of a paper material, and they're pleated, where they're folded together, and you've got all these different pleats in there, so that it creates lots of surface area for this air to pass through. And the more surface area there is on the cleaner, then it can catch more dirt and debris and keep it from winding up into the carburetor, because that's where your air filter is. It's catching air as the engine is pulling it into the motor through the carburetor. All right, because you got to have the fuel air mix. So the air enters through the carburetor, and the carburetor supplies the fuel, or it meters the fuel coming from the gas tank into the cylinder on these motors. That's where the piston is. And the air filter is sitting there to help keep as much of that dirt and debris out, so that you're not introducing more dirt into the motor to increase the wear, and also so that it won't plug up the orifices, the holes inside the carburetor, or the jets, okay, that this air and this fuel goes through, and it's set in the precise way it's metered in there to provide the correct fuel and air ratio to allow the thing to fire, allow it to explode. And it's amazing the volume of air that it takes. If on a gallon to gallon basis, it takes tenfold more gallons of air to consume or to burn a gallon of gasoline in these little motors. So air is really important. If air filter gets dirty and it doesn't allow air to flow through it as well as it once did, it's going to affect the engine performance. The engine may not run as good. It will not produce as much power. And in operating a motor like that under those stress conditions can limit the life. It can shorten the lifespan on the motor a great deal. But again, talking about the filter itself, you know, sometimes they're not super dirty. When you pull the pre-cleaner off, you clean the pre-cleaner, and you look at the filter itself, you can see if it's dirty or not because the paper is going to be a light color. And then if you got lots of dark debris on there, the dust and dirt and just trapped junk that this thing is caught as it's been sucking air into the motor, well, sometimes you can remove some of that. Now, most of these operator manuals will tell you don't use strong compressed air to blow the trash out of these filters. You know, you think, well, that's a good way to get it out of there because you blow dust off stuff, blow dirt out of things. Sure, you can. But if you've got a fair amount of pressure behind that airstream, you know, the manufacturers tell us that it can damage that paper filter to the point that it takes away some of its integrity, if you will, and it will compromise the way it's supposed to do its job. So very often you're going to see directions, instead of blowing it out with the compressed air, it'll tell you to take and to bump or to tap that filter against a solid object to remove large particles, and then maybe go in with a fine brush and brush dirt and dust away from there. But as I said, typically they'll tell you to not use a real strong compressed air. So you got clean fuel, the motor's lubricated, you've got good oil in there to keep everything smooth and not binding up, generating excessive heat and causing premature wear inside. You've got a clean air filter that's going to help filter out any dirt, and it's going to allow the necessary amount of air to enter the motor so they can create the correct ratio of the fuel and air mixture to be ignited inside the combustion chamber, which is in the cylinder. That's where the piston is. It runs up and down and causes this thing to work in the first place. Then you got to have a spark, okay? And that spark is provided through a spark plug, just like an automobile would have. A 4-cycle gasoline engine has a spark plug. Now, spark plugs don't have moving parts in them. They don't wear out real fast. And it may be that you don't have to change the spark plug very often. Again, your equipment manual will suggest to you how frequently a spark plug should be changed, or how frequently it should be examined. And you'll find that it's not that often. Okay, it's not that often. If you do have to change a spark plug, you want to go back with the same kind that was in there before. The operator's manual tells you that you need to have a spark plug of a certain rating, if you will, or of a certain size. The spark plug itself, it screws into the head of the motor, and here you can see my mouse arrow. So here's the tip of the spark plug that the spark plug wire attaches to. This is a porcelain insulator. You got the metal part here. The electrode is located down here. That's where the spark happens, and that's where the screw threads are, or the threads are, that allows it to be screwed into the head of the engine. And so the spark plug wire is attached, and this thing's spinning around, and it's got it's got a magnet inside there, and it's got a coil with some copper wires, and in essence, it's created just a little electric motor. Okay, you got the wire spinning around that magnet. It creates electric current, and it fires that current through this spark plug. It kind of multiplies a little bit, I think, and it comes out down here on the electrode end and causes that fuel air mixture inside the piston, or inside the cylinder, to explode, to ignite, and that's what forces that piston up and down and makes the motor spin around, makes the bore blades turn, makes the tiller tines turn, makes the wheels turn, and so on. If you do have to change a spark plug, again, just get the same kind of spark plug that is suggested to you in your owner's manual, your operator's manual. And it's not a bad idea to check the gap on that plug. And the gap, it's hard to see in this picture, I guess, because you can't really see that plainly the way this thing is setting. But they're coming down out of the center, out of the bottom of this spark plug. There's like the electrode, it's just a round little piece of metal sticking out of the bottom of that plug, and then coming off the end of or the bottom of on the outside of it, you got a metal piece bent across that comes over and centers on top of that electrode. Now they're not touching. Okay, those two pieces, electrode and the piece that comes across and straddles that, centered over the top electrode, they don't touch. There's a gap, there's a space there. That's called a gap. And it'll tell you that you need to have X amount of space it's called the gap, the spark plug gap between that little strap and the electrode itself. And you can use a tool called a spark plug gauge to help you adjust that, because that influences how efficiently it generates a spark and creates the what's necessary to ignite that fuel air mix and make the thing run. Okay, so we've got it to run, and now the idea is we want this thing to cut. And those things that I mentioned about, lawnmower motor, again, that's for any 4-cycle engine, whether it's on a lawnmower, whether it's a garden tiller, just any 4-cycle motor, whether it's on a riding lawnmower, push mower, they all work the same way, whether it's a single cylinder or whether it's a 2-cylinder motor. Very often, if you got ride-on mowers, they're going to be 2 cylinders. Okay, the principle's the same. They'll have 2 spark plugs. You have 1 spark plug per cylinder, and you'll have 2 spark plug wires, because that 1 spark plug wire per spark plug. Okay, but you got a fuel tank, you have a air filter. Sometimes you'll have equipment that has a fuel filter in the line. All right, or you may have an oil filter in there. All right, at that point, it will tell you how often to change the oil, and if it has a filter, you change the filter. And it'll tell you in your manual, what kind of filter to use, how often to do that, how you do it, the process. But whether it's a big motor or a small motor, those principles are all the same. They're all the same. Now, so we're going to make sure it runs, all right, because the idea is for it to do its job. If it's a lawnmower, it's to cut grass. If it's a tiller, it's to cultivate. It's to plow ground, to break up ground, to control weeds, to cultivate, etc. So if we're talking about a lawnmower, then a clean cut is better than a jagged cut. And it takes a sharp mower blade to make a clean cut. So you can see this little diagram here, these 4 grass blades that have been cut. So you look at blade A, that's for a rotary lawnmower. You're not going to find a much cleaner cut than that right there. It's not super jagged across the end. It's a fairly clean cut. It is cut at an angle, which you would expect it to be. Just a pretty good job. Now we go to B. All right, the second blade there, B. It's not a super ragged cut, but look, it's got a damaged place down here lower on the blade, below where it's actually cut, and that's because the blade, it kind of folded over, the mower blade kind of folded over the grass blade before it cut it and caused that damage look to it. And you get down to C and to D, look how ragged and how jagged the ends of those grass blades are. That's the result of a very dull mower blade. They weren't cut, they were shredded off. Often, I ask folks, when you see something like this, are you cutting grass or are you beating it into submission? Because literally those dull mower blades, they just beat the end of those grass blades off and they cause that ragged, jagged cut. Well, why is that bad? Well, for a couple of reasons, it's not desirable. For one is the appearance. All right, if you look how much difference there is in the amount of damage on grass blade A versus C or D. All right, look how much damaged area there is on C and D. All right, what do they have in common? The ends are brown. Okay, you cut those off, you cut those ends off, and that cut, it's going to dry out. So the more jagged, the more surface area there is, it's damaged. As you're gonna increase the amount of surface area that's damaged by a dull mower blade, then it creates a bigger damaged area out there, and you've got a bigger brown spot or a brown tip on there. Now just think, if the entire lawn, if all the leaf tips out there on that lawn, if all the grass blade tips look like that, then boom, that's a pretty dadgum brown cast over the top of the yard. And it's visible, and it's going to be there until the stuff grows back out again, and some of that kind of fades away. So it's bad from that respect because it can influence the appearance of the yard. Instead of that nice green color out there, you've got a brown cast on top of some nice green color. And the other thing is, the more surface area you damage, which you're going to have more surface area damage with the dull blade, then the more space you've got for the grass, for water to leave the plant through evaporation, through evapotranspiration. You've got more wound area for, say, a disease pathogen to enter into the grass plant, and infect it with a fungal disease of some sort. So those are a couple of reasons why you want to maintain sharp mower blades, just to improve the overall quality of the cut, the appearance of the yard, and overall health of the grass that you're maintaining in the lawn. So how do we get a sharp mower blade? All right, so this young lady in this picture, she's holding up a couple of tools that can help us do this. The one in her left hand is called a blade stop or a blade break, if you will. And we'll show you how that works here in just a second. But in her right hand, she's got a long handle ratchet. Okay, a long handle ratchet. The longer the handle is on a wrench, whether it's a ratchet wrench or a socket or an open end wrench or a box end wrench that you're using to remove the bolts that hold the mower blade on, the more mechanical advantage you have. And the more mechanical advantage you have, the more leverage you have, the easier it is to remove those things. If you use a long handle ratchet like this, that makes it easier than using a short handle ratchet. Well, not everybody has a long handle ratchet. Maybe you've got a short handle wrench or short, like here, she's got this short handle ratchet. So what can you do to achieve that same advantage, mechanical advantage or leverage that you would have with a long handle ratchet? Well, so what this lady's doing is she's taking that little short handle ratchet and she's just got a piece of pipe that is the inside diameter is such that she can slide that piece of pipe down over the ratchet handle. Well, boom, she just created herself a very long handle ratchet that will allow her to have some mechanical advantage to increase her leverage to make it easier to loosen those bolts and take that mower blade off. So we get down here and we look, and you can see right at the bottom of the screen, you can see that blade stop or that blade block, blade break, whatever term you want to use to refer to it, it's attached to the mower. What that does, it just screws on. It's got a T screw handle up here, and it's got this bracket, and the bracket is shaped such that it, when you open, you open the handle up, you open the screw handle up, so you get space between the screw and the bracket. It will slide over the mower housing, and it will, the mower blade will fit up inside that bracket, and you tighten that back down, and boom, you've got that blade locked in place so that when then you start to take to loosen the bolts up, the blade's not going to turn, because it will do that. The blade will turn if there's nothing holding it in place. And it would be, I think, appropriate here to remind folks that if you're going to work or to remove a lawnmower blade, et cetera, things like that, then you ought to disconnect your spark plug wire, because if you do turn that mower blade, you're turning the motor, okay, the crankshaft in the motor. And you know, if it's a recoil start mower like most of these walk behind mowers are, that's what starts it. Is you turn the thing over enough, and so by turning it, theoretically you could start the motor if you turn that blade enough, if your spark plug wire is still attached. So it's a good idea to remove that spark plug wire. And so she's got the blade stop attached up there. It's got it screwed down good and tight. That blade is held in place. So now she takes her ratchet with her cheater bar on there, if you will, but the piece of pipe that extends over that, so she got good mechanical leverage. And boom, it's so easy now to remove those bolts that hold that mower blade on, because they can be put on there pretty tight. You got to figure those blades are spinning at 3,600 plus revolutions per minute, and so you don't want them coming off while those things are spinning around. So they need to be adjusted. They need to be put back on pretty tight. But that can be sometimes make them more difficult to remove. And so having that mechanical advantage for you right there by having that long handle on the end of your wrench can work well for you. Okay, so this particular one has two bolts holding it on. You take those bolts off and you get the mower blade out. And so you look at it, and if you've not looked at one up close before, the blades on a rotary type lawnmower, and that's what we're talking about here, they're sharp on either end. The center of the blade's not sharp, but the cutting edges are out on either end. And you see the yellow arrows, they point to the cutting edges. And if you look at it closely, you'll see that the cutting edge is angled or beveled. All right. Well, you don't want to change that angle when you sharpen a mower blade. You don't want to change it at all if you can help it. You want to maintain that original bevel, that original angle. So she's attached, this lady, she's attached her mower blade here in this vise so she can hold it good and steady. And she's going then to sharpen it. Now you can sharpen it, use different tools. Here she's using a file. All right, a file. Now I'll point out right here that some folks will tell you that when you file, okay, when you're using a file to sharpen, that you should file from the edge. You should file beginning at the edge away. All right, from the edge. Other folks say it doesn't matter. I don't know if it matters a whole lot or not, because you need to do it in such a way that where it's comfortable for you, and you can get to it okay? And you can sharpen the blade evenly all across the length of it. So she's taking that file and she's holding it at an angle that is in keeping, or it mimics the angle or the bevel that was originally on the edge of that mower blade. So she can use that file, and she's going to file across the length of that edge. And in the process of doing that, you want to maintain that same angle. If you've got any, nicks and little gaps, maybe little stones, rocks, or something, you work those out. But you file evenly across the length of the cutting edge, trying to maintain that same bevel. You can use a grinder, like an angle grinder, with a grinding stone on it, do the same thing, but you have to follow that same procedure to keep that edge, that angle the same, that bevel the same. If you're going to use power equipment like that to sharpen with, it's a good idea to wear safety glasses. It's a good idea to wear gloves. It's a good idea that whether you use a power equipment, or whether like a power grinder or not, if you're just using a file or something, just to keep you from skinning your hands, from cutting your knuckles, anything like that. But when she gets through, okay, what are you doing when you sharpen the mower blade? Well, you're removing little bits of metal from it, right? So theoretically, you're taking away some weight, okay? So that the blade needs to be balanced, all right? So that means you shouldn't take more metal off of one end than the other, and leave one end weighing less than the other, or one end being heavier than the other. So you want to balance. How do you balance that? How do you tell if it's balanced after you sharpen the mower blade? Well, using a little tool like this, which is called a cone balancer, is a good, cheap, little easy way to do that. This little balancer, this little two pieces made out of plastic. The cone is sitting down on the top of this this little needle-like shaft that extends up from the base of this thing, and you set the mower blade on just like that. Okay, so if the mower blades remains relatively level when you do this, that indicates to you that it's pretty well balanced. Because if you had removed more metal from one end than the other end, then you're going to maybe see that one end is heavier than the other, and it's going to lean down closer to the bench. So if you find that's the case, if you got one end that is dropping towards the bench, then you need to take a little more metal off of that end by sharpening it just a little bit more to help it balance out. Well, what if you don't have one of these things? Not everybody has one of these. They're cheap, and you can buy them at places just like the blade stop tool that was using to take those blades off. You can buy those at lawnmower shops, at places that sell replacement parts and equipment for lawnmowers. Lots of places will sell those kinds of things, and both of those are inexpensive, and they can be good tools to help you maintain, make it easier to get lawnmower blades off and put them back on, and also to make sure they're balanced after you sharpen them. But if you don't have one and you sharpen the mower blade, another do-it-yourself deal is to drive a nail in 2x4 in the shed out there somewhere, and balance the mower blade over that nail. And if it'll relatively balance, not one end hang lower down than the other on that nail, and again, it's just on the nail. It's the blade's not touching the 2x4 or anything like that. It's just hanging on that nail. If it'll balance on there, that's a pretty good indicator that you've got it pretty well balanced, and it's not going to cause a problem for you. Well, now, why is it a problem if it's not balanced? Okay, why is it a problem? Well, if we back up just a minute to right back here, so on a walk behind mower like this, just has a single blade on it. That blade is attached directly to the crankshaft of this engine. So if this blade is not balanced, it can cause a vibration when this thing is spinning around. It's several thousand revolutions per minute, spinning really fast. Well, that vibration will cause vibration to run all through that crankshaft, and that can cause excessive wear in the engine before that would happen before it would normally occur. Okay, it will wear out faster. It can cause seals to start leaking. So balancing is important. It can flat wreck one if you run it very long with a blade out of balance like that. But what about on riding mowers that have multiple blades? They're down here on the deck. They're not attached directly to the engine. No, they're not. You've got a pulley on the coming off the bottom of the engine that runs a belt, and then that belt comes down and runs these pulleys that turn the blades down here on the mower deck. Okay, the same thing is true there, except those blades are on the deck or attached to the deck by a thing called a spindle. And if the blades are out of balance, they will cause the same kind of vibration, and it will damage those spindles. It will cause those bearings in the spindles to wear out faster. So maintaining a balanced blade, is important, and that's the reason for doing that. So we've used this small lawnmower, this walk behind lawnmower, as an example to remove the mower blades and sharpen the one. But what if you do have a riding mower? Well, you're not going to turn it up on its edge to do that, right? No, you're not. Oh, back up and say one thing. When you turn a mower up on its edge like that, when you turn it up on the edge, you need to turn it up so that the gas tank is pointed up, okay? Or excuse me, you want the gas tank, yes, you want the gas tank pointed up, because when you drain the oil out of one, you're going to change the oil. You can drain the oil by turning the mower up on its side. You put a pan to catch the oil there, and you pull the dipstick cover off and allow the oil to drain through the fill hole. But you always put the oil sump down, or the oil dipstick or the oil check cap down, and you put the gas tank up, so the gas filler cap goes up. Just kind of remember that. Okay, but so what if you do have a riding mower? You want to pull the blades off and sharpen those. Really and truly, you need to be able to get under it. Okay, and the best way to do that, or the simplest way to do that, I guess the easiest way, is to have a mower lift jack that will raise the front wheels of that lawnmower up, so that you've got it tilted up at an angle. You've got all Scotch good, so this is going to roll off, and it will allow you access to get those mower blades. The process is the same. You just got more of them to deal with than you do on these smaller walk behind lawnmowers. Okay, now when you're doing this, when you're sharpening blades, it's also a good idea to clean the mower deck off, because grass is going to accumulate under there. It's going to stick to the underside of that deck. And what's the problem with that? Well, number one, if it's steel deck, it holds moisture. It can cause rusting, and you'll wear holes. You'll have rust holes appear in the deck much sooner than you would have otherwise, and so the deck wears out. And the other thing is, if you get all this space up under this deck filled up with grass clippings, then it doesn't have the same airflow that it once had. It's not going to discharge clippings. If you're discharging back out onto the lawn, it's not going to discharge clippings as readily as it once did. You don't get the same quality of cut, okay, because it can't circulate the grass clippings up under there, especially if you're using a mulching blade, because that space is occupied now by all this caked on grass clipping. So this lady here, she's using a putty knife, and she's scraping those grass clippings off to keep the underside of the mower deck nice and clean and open, so that you get good air circulation, you get good clipping circulation as you're going across the yard there, mowing the grass, etc. Okay, well, what about hand tools? All right, can you sharpen hand tools? Yeah, any of those hand tools that have got a sharp edge on it, so long as you can get to that edge with a sharpening tool, you can sharpen it. So here she's using sharpening a pair of handheld clippers, hedge clippers, if you will. The same principle applies. It's got a beveled edge to it. And if you use a file, or whether you use an angle grinder, a mechanical device, you want to maintain that same angle, that same bevel as you sharpen that. And again, you want to file all the way across the blade. You take out any little nicks and so on in the blade, smooth those out. And how sharp are we talking about on these blades? Okay, and I guess that's something we need to mention. How sharp are we talking about on a lawnmower blade? You're not talking about sharp as a knife. You don't want to shave with it. Matter of fact, if you get it sharp like that, it's going to dull much quicker, because you create a very thin edge out there, and that edge is not going to last very long as it beats through this old tough grass and weeds and things like that we mow sometimes. The idea is to have a functional sharpness, if you will. I've heard it described that a sharp mower blade is maybe a little bit sharper than a butter knife, but it's not nearly as sharp as a carving knife is. And that's kind of a good way to look at it, I guess. But you want a uniform edge across it, but not super sharp. And the same thing is true with on something like this set of hedge clippers right here. But as long as it's got a beveled edge that you can get to it, a sharp edge, if you can get to it with a sharpening tool, then you can sharpen that. And what does that do? Well, it does a couple of things. Number one, it makes it easier to cut stuff. And how does that influence you, the operator? Well, if it's easier to cut, then you don't use up as much energy to cut stuff because it cuts easier in the first place. So you can decrease, just fatigue from operating the equipment. And just like a sharp mower blade makes a cleaner cut, a sharp pair of pruners, a sharp pair of hedge clippers makes a cleaner cut, and a cleaner cut is not as ragged. It's in the long run, it's better for the health of the plant that you're working on. Any tool that's got an edge to it, you can sharpen it. Here you got a hoe. You're looking at the face, the back face of a hoe, which you would use in a garden for cultivation, etc. And notice how the edge is kind of curled over there. So this hoe's been in some ground, probably in some rocky ground at one time or another, and those edges kind of curled over. If you sharpen this thing, it's going to make a hoe in the garden or wherever you're using that hoe to cut weeds, to cultivate, to dig with. It's going to make it work a lot easier for you. So the process is kind of the same for sharpening this. You want to, first of all, maybe clean the thing off a little bit. Use a wire brush, clean the dirt off of it. Some folks say, "Oh, the dirt will." It's like having dust on a table in a house. The dust protects the finish on the furniture. Some folks might say they don't like the dust. Well, I don't know. That might be one school of thought. But also, if you keep dirt and so on allowed to accumulate on these metal parts, that can trap some moisture in there. It can also lead to earlier rusting, and the more it rusts, then you shorten the life of the tool. So removing some of the dirt is always a good idea, and you don't want that dirt, the particles of the dirt getting into your sharpening tools anyway. So taking a wire brush or something and going through and brushing off a tool that's got some dirt on it is a good idea. You could use a hand brush. You could put use a power drill with a brush, a wire brush attachment on it. But anyway, just clean the metal surface off before you start sharpening on it. And then so she's going to smooth out the backside on this blade first to get rid of these little rolled over places and how that corner's kind of turned over right there. So she flattens that out pretty good. So she's done that. She's flattened that off. Now it's a little better than it was before. So now she puts the hoe in the vise and turns it over and works on the cutting edge. Notice it's got a bevel to it, just like those mower blades, just like the clipper blades did, the shears. You maintain that same bevel. You file across the length of the cutting face, and maintain that same angle. And when you're finished, you see bright, shiny metal. And I promise you that will cut a lot easier when you take that out to the garden to hoe around the tomatoes or clean the corn patch out or whatever the case may be. Here's a set of hand pruners. Whether you're talking about hand pruners or the bigger tools, the loppers that you use to cut larger limbs, it's got a beveled edge to it. And as long as you can get to that edge with a sharpening tool, you can sharpen that. And by sharpening that, you can make it easier to use. You can make it less fatiguing on you. And it's just better, again, for the plants because you're making cleaner cuts. And those clean cuts tend to heal faster. They don't cause as much damage on the plant. Boy, we're running out of time here. I've been talking about 45 minutes or so. So I'll say thank you to my assistant today, Kathy Lou Mote. She helped in the production of this by being the model for doing some of this work as she demonstrated sharpening some of these tools and doing some of the maintenance work of the lawnmower and so on. And boy, I'm happy to say that I'm very fortunate she is my wife. So I thank her for doing that. Now, Barbie, I think we've got time here for a few questions. If any of the folks have anything they'd like to ask, well, I'll sure do my best to try to answer it for you.
Well, I'm not seeing any right now in the chat, but something that I learned today, Mitchell, and I guess I should have thought about it because of tires, having to be balanced and everything, but the little balance thing, I've never seen one of them, and then I didn't think about the nail in the wall, but that makes sense, that if you're balancing something, and if it's off, then it'll go cattywampus or what have you.
That's a good right word. You get one in cattywampus that it goes to shaking, and you'll know it too. You put one back on that is not balanced, and as soon as you start it, it'll make a heck of a racket. And what you said about tires, okay, on your ride out equipment where you've got pneumatic tires, inflatable tires. Let's say that and again, lawnmowers, because we use lawnmowers more than anything. Basically, you have garden tillers, you have chainsaws, etc., but we use lawnmowers more than anything because we have to cut grass so often. So let's say you're mowing and doggone it, it's just uneven. A mower deck, one side's higher than the other. And you try adjusting deck, Before you do that, check your air pressure in your tires. because if you've got a back tire or front tire that's low and the others are all where they need to be, then you're going to have an unlevel cut. So that might be the simplest thing, is to make sure all the air pressure in the tires is pretty much uniform before you start making adjustments on the deck. And a lot of times it'll save you, some skin knuckles and some frustration and aggravation, when you could have just checked the tires in the first place.
That's a good point. We've got teenagers at my house, and
Yeah.
they tend to mow, and that's one of those things that they don't think to check. And I've come home before, and you see all these little stripes kind of in the yard, and he's like, I didn't hit nothing, Mama. I don't know why it's not cutting good. And then Aaron goes out there and checks the tires, and we got like one that's low or
one
flat.
About half flat, yeah.
Yes.
One of them about half flat. And
yes.
Sometimes it's those simple things that, you check on. I taught the motor stuff. It was all 4-cycle engines, but string trimmers, gas powered string trimmers, chainsaws, they've got air filters on them too, even though they're 2-cycle motors. And the reason they're 2-cycle motors, you mix the oil directly with the gas. They don't have a separate oil sump. Okay, and that's so that they can be held upside down at odd angles and the thing still be lubricated. Okay, but they've got an air filter on them. It may not be as big as what you see on a lawnmower, but it works the same way. And those need to be cleaned periodically. They have spark plugs. They need to be changed every once in a while. And clean gasoline, the fuel stabilizer, that works in a 2-cycle motor as well as a 4-cycle motor. So it's not going to damage your weed eater or the chainsaw or whatever by using that stabilizer. And it can sure make the starting one, especially the first time in the spring, if you start with the gasoline in it like that, it can make it a lot simpler because it's not as apt to gum up a carburetor as the stuff evaporates in there and forms residues. And really and truly, that's when you do your tune up on these things anyway in the fall, so that boom, when you're ready to mow the yard in the spring, you're ready to mow the yard in the spring. You don't have to spend time working on the old lawnmower and thinking about words you didn't learn in Sunday school while you're doing that.
So you do have one question in the chat. It says, okay, if you have old gas in the tool, where can you discard it?
Yeah, where can you discard that? Well, I don't have an official answer to that. Where can you discard it? Boy, there was a time when the what anybody would have told you is, well, you go find a piece of fence row that you want to kill the honeysuckle or whatever in, and you pour it on that. Now, is that correct today? Well, probably not. Okay. Problem, I'm not going to suggest to you that you need to go pour old gasoline or oil, either one, onto the ground. But oil can be taken to many auto parts stores, lawnmower shops, etc. They'll, you collect oil and you change it and recycle it. And actually, if you pour a little gasoline in there with that oil that you're going to take back to the recycle center, that's probably the simplest thing to do. Is to dispose of it like that. That's the best suggestion I could offer, I think.
And then they ask if you burn it, and I think the thing on that is, if it's gasoline, you don't want to burn it.
Well, gasoline, boy, folks, more people get burned, I guess, trying to use gasoline as a fuel source to start a brush pile, burn a brush pile or something, because it is much more volatile. Well, I wouldn't suggest you burn it. And people say, oh, you put it on the fire ant mound. So, well, you know what? It's yours. You can do it the way you want to, I guess, but I'm not going to suggest to you that's what you ought to do.
And I have one question, Mitchell. On your tools, do you recommend putting like a lubricant on there, like after you sharpened them?
Yeah, spray it down. I mean, you could wipe them off with a little bit of oil just to help keep rust. And and we didn't talk about the handles, but especially wooden handle. They can get a splinter on there once in a while. You take just a piece of fine sandpaper, sandpaper those off, and keep them so you don't get splinters in your hand. But what you said about lubricant works awfully good to help keep rust down. And I didn't mention this. I mean, with a limited amount of time, we don't talk about it so much. But like a shovel, for example, you know, just a round point shovel. If you got to dig a hole, it's pretty muddy. Boy, that old gummy mud will stick to it, and you know, you let it dry and you go knock it off, but you still got a coating on there. There are folks that'll take you know, a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket, and fill it partially full of sand, and take some old motor oil and pour through that sand and kind of mix it together, and then they'll use that to say go run that shovel blade up and down in there. It acts kind of like a scouring powder. It kind of helps scrape some of that residue off of it, and plus you got a little oil lubrication on there, so you know that can work too. But you know, just rubbing it off with a wire brush, and then taking a coat of oil and wiping across it. I'm not talking about the heavy coat, you know, just a few drops, and you just rub it in and wipe it off.
All right. Are there any other questions for Mitchell? Well, Mitchell, it has been very informative, and you know, it reminded me of a lot of things, and I think I need to make my kids watch this, you know, before they go out there and mess with any of the power equipment or the other tools. And there's things that I can do with, you know, my hand tools and everything. But with that, if there's no more questions, we're going to end our session today, and I'm going to ask y'all to go and see our lawn and garden show. So thank you very much, Mitchell.
All right, thank y'all. I appreciate it.